welcome to Book Therapy. I'm Lucy. I am a wellness counselor, sometimes life coach, usually music educator. I live in so-called Edmonton in Alberta in Canada, and when I'm not doing all of those things, I'm reading. And what have you been reading now, Lucy? To be honest, I read this a few weeks ago. I have I might need therapy myself about this. I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about this book. Have you read Fourth Wing yet? I feel like everybody in the world was, or at least everybody on the book talk world was like convinced / possibly manipulated into reading this book. It was everywhere there for a second, and they were all like, Zayden's a better book boyfriend than Rhysand, which I take personally. But I bought it and I read it, and I did have a lot of fun reading it. Like, there was some parts of the book that I really liked and I thought were really entertaining to read. But for me, it was just like, I was a bit disappointed because it was like scene by scene divergent. There was like Aragon and Divergent had kind of awkward baby. And like I thought I was gonna, I'm a writer as well. I like to write my own like fiction novels. And I've taken a lot of courses in like how to read books, and I could definitely hear my like critical brain being like, why would you decide to say it like that? Like, what's that all about? So I had some qualms with this book, but I also took away some things from the book that were just like, oh wait, like that's, like, are we sure we're gonna get behind that? I feel like the book overall, definitely, I can see why people would enjoy to read it, like there's dragons and training academy, which is like one of my favorite tropes in especially like the young adult fiction. When I was a little younger, reading things like Hunger Games and Divergent and all that, I always loved the training scenes. So you get a lot of those in this book. So if you're a fan of that, this book's for you. But I have some follow-up questions and some follow-up observations as someone who has to think about these things kind of every day in my job. Reading it, I was like, I'm not prepared to let that go. Particularly chapter 32 of this book. That's what I would like to talk about today. Maybe I'll talk about the rest at another point, but before I get into it, the same caveat stands as always. Please take what I say with a grain of salt. And also, if you don't want spoilers for this book, or this book is your favorite book and you don't want to talk about it in this light, throw it in the garbage. You don't need what I'm saying. This is just like an opportunity to kind of look at the content that we consume and see, like, how does it affect me when I'm reading it? What are the beliefs that I'm like kind of gathering from this? What am I reading about? How am I relating with these characters? So it's just a way to sort of look into that process as a reader, and to kind of bring a little bit of our own well-being in, if we can. I wouldn't call it particularly light, but maybe a little bit lighter than the last video that I made. But there's something just for you to know. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And then, like I said, my last video, if you haven't seen it, I recommend go watch just the first little bit, where I'm talking a little bit about like consuming mental health content off the internet and things to be aware of and that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to talk about that again. That's in the other video, but take it all with a grain of salt and do with this what you will. Let's get into it. Fourth Wing. As I say, I'm literally not paid at all to promote or endorse or any of these things. It's just a passion of mine to talk about books and therapy. So, chapter 32. In this book, we've learned at this point the main character, who I like sometimes Violet. She knows at this point that, and spoilers, she knows that this Zayden guy who she's met and was like immediately attracted to. People always said this was a slow burn, or like a, I guess it is kind of enemies to lovers. It is, definitely. But, like, she was always into it, which is interesting. Like, that's a nice addition to this trope, is the, like, I always had feelings for you. I always was interested in having, some kind of a sexual interaction with you. And, like, just being as sex positive and, like, sex forward. I thought that was really interesting and kind of nice for a change. But Violet knows, and like we as a reader have known this too, like because of all at the beginning of all the chapters, like you get little history lessons or little like snippets from journals and all this. So we know that Zayden is the child of one of the of the rebellion, and that his father was the leader of that. Like that's introduced right off the bat. Like I'm not even spoiling anything for you. And that he hates Violet and her mom as a result of this, because her mom, Violet's mom, is responsible for killing the rebels, which is interesting. I'm a bit excited by the end of the book. I don't know if I'm excited enough to read the sequel though. But so this chapter 32, she's like, "Where's Zayden?" And people are like, don't bother him, because it's the anniversary of his dad getting murdered, I'm pretty sure, being executed, and the children had to watch this happen. Oh my god, that's rough. And this, like, Zayden has been trying to protect and kind of like keep them under his wing, the children of the rebellion. He's been like, just helping them to get by and stuff. He's taken on this role, and like, I think that I'm a little fuzzy on the details because I read it a little while ago, and I read it a bit fast. But that he's like responsible for them in some way. Like he's got like marks on him for them or something like this. Anyway, so it's the day here. Okay. Everyone across the ravine is celebrating his father's death, and he's out here mourning it alone. When Brennan died, that's her brother, I had Mira and Dad, but Zayden had no one. So, like, okay, so he's mourning the loss of his dad. It's the anniversary of that today. And so she's, like, feeling for him, right? Like, she wants to help him. I see him sitting about a third of the way across the narrow stone bridge, staring up at the moon, like it somehow adds to the burden he carries. He had the lives of all 107 marked ones carved into his back, taking responsibility for them. But who takes responsibility / takes care - of him? So, who takes care of him? Already, like, my mind is like, responsibility and caring for somebody, those are two different things, and we switched those pretty fast. So, she's already like seeing that he's sad, and she wants to go and care for him because she's like, who cares for you? So that's interesting. And also at this point in the book, like there's like sexual tension. I think they've maybe had sex once. They definitely kissed, and I think they maybe had sex once. Maybe not. I'm not sure. This might be the first one. I think it's the first time. I think this is the first one. And then there's a little like thing here. You don't really know me, not at my core. Isn't that how he replied when I told him that I'd end up falling for him? As if knowing him would somehow make me want him less, but everything I learn about him only makes me tumble harder and faster. gonna have to make a whole other video about that. But anyway, so she's like, I'm in love with Zayden. She says that. And I've kept out of his bed, out of his arms, because he's adamant I can't fall for him, but that ship has sailed a long time ago. What's the point holding back? All this stuff. And then she goes out onto the parapet to go see him. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing out here? I could ask you the same thing. You could have fallen and died. Anyway, so she just like inserts herself into this moment where he's sitting there mourning. And she comes and like they have a little talk, and he's like, go back. And he goes, only if you do. Or she says, only if you do. I want to be wherever you are. And I mean it. And then, I know why you said you don't see a future for us. And then he says, do you? And then she says, you want me. And no, I'm not just talking about in bed. You, period, want, period, me, Zayden Ryerson. You might not say it, but you do one better and show it. You show it every time you choose to trust me, every time your eyes linger on mine. Blah, blah, blah. ... etc., etc. Then she talks about they're like, she's like jealous and all this stuff. And oh my gosh, let me get to the part here. The part she goes, come with me. And then he shakes his head and looks away. I'm not in a place to take care of anyone tonight. And yes, I know that's a shitty thing to say since the anniversary of losing Brennan. I know, I slide my hands down his arms. Come with me, Zayden. Trust me, come on. And then they get to the room. Where are you going? Where are we going, he asks. You're taking me to your room, she says. I'm what? He answers. You're taking me to your room. And then she goes like, she says, she tells him sit. And then she says, sit, I order, staring down. And then he goes, I don't want to talk about it. And then she's like, I never said you had to. And then he goes, now what? I move between his thighs and run my fingers through his hair. Now I take care of you. Okay, that was the line I wanted to get to. Okay. Where do I even begin? I know there's a little like, I precede that quite a bit. I just have problems with this. So I know, so her brother also died that same day. So they're both mourning someone at this time. And as she said, I had mom and dad. I had my mom and Mira and dad, I think she said, and he had no one. So you can't do that. Like, she didn't ask if he wanted that. Also, when someone is mourning, we don't need to take care of them. We need to support them in the way that they need it. And did he ask for sex? No. Did he want that? He asked her to go back. You're allowed to be sexually attracted to someone too and not want to have sex. I get that the sexual tension in the book's been building. Like, okay, cool. And I still feel like it's giving me bad vibes. Like, yeah, I think, like, empathetically, feeling for Zayden, my first impulse wouldn't be in a moment where I've acknowledged to myself, like, okay, he needs a little support today. He needs a little bit of, I'm going to be a bit of a supporter for him. I don't think I would like she says, I order him, or come, do this. I don't feel like that's the way I would go about that with somebody, especially not somebody who I'm like, I'm in love with you. Because we need to give people some space to decide what feels best for them, especially in a moment like that. And there's a lot of instances where connection, sex, intimacy can be really like quite beautiful when you're grieving, you know? Like you can be with somebody in a really intimate and understanding way where you can be held in your emotions. And sometimes it's a nice escape. People enjoy to have sex to feel some pleasure. That's okay. Like if that's the coping mechanism, okay, cool. But I don't think people who are grieving and coping with their grief the way they know how should be getting ordered around by someone who's just decided, I'm in love with him, it's time for me to take control of this situation. Like, girl, it's not about you. How he feels, it's not about you. He's grieving for his dad that he watched get executed. He's probably also grieving for the fact that he's now responsible for, what did they say, 170 people? Like, holy shit. Yeah, I miss the consent in this book. I definitely am biased coming off of some of the other books that I've read, where like authors are clearly trying to make that a more pointed conversation piece. Thank goodness. Because I feel like, especially in something like this, and you'd notice this in Bridgerton too, right? If you read any of those articles, where it was like, I don't think that was okay. I'm not going to go into it because I haven't really given a content warning too much about that, but I think it's important for like young women reading these books. Yeah, you know, we're reclaiming here. This book was an interesting narrative of being like, she's gonna go for it. Like she's gonna put herself out there and she's gonna go for it with him, which I think is really wicked and cool. But I don't like knowing that it's okay to flip the script but not change the topic of consent, because like we need to have strong characters asking, hey, do you want this? Hey, do you want me to connect with you through sex and intimacy? Or do you want to make that decision on your own and know that I'm open to it in whatever capacity and would love to be with you? I think that like, I just don't like the idea of deciding how someone is going to mourn for them, or deciding if somebody's, you know, they've been grieving enough. They don't need to grieve anymore. I hate that. That just gives me such an icky feeling in my tummy, because like grief, especially when it's, you know, he's gone through a trauma. Like, so has she with the loss of her brother. This is hard stuff. I just think we need to be asking questions more. That scene could easily have gone exactly the same way with this is what I would like to do with you. Can we do it? Because so much of this with him, this is what I noticed, and I was interested at the end of the book, is that he protests. He says no. He's like, I don't want to get close to you. I don't want to have a relationship with you. I'm attracted to you. I like you, but I don't want to go any further into a relationship. But she always takes that to mean like, but he wants me. But like, I think we've learned to flip this around now and to say like, no, that's like coercion. People can say no for whatever reason. You know, they're even allowed to make mistakes and to change their mind. But I think we gotta respect people's boundaries, especially when it's something like with sex and that kind of thing. I mean, that sounds obvious when I say that, but it freaks me out when I read books and it's just so left out. And in this one, where was the woman? Because I think that a lot of times people will let it slide. Like in Bridgerton, where they're like, oh, but it's the girl, so it's fine. No, it's not fine. Everyone, all genders, everybody needs to be included in this consent conversation and like asking people questions. Like, do you want this? Are you, you know, you're mourning tonight. How can I connect with you? Not just deciding like, this is how tonight's gonna go for me. You're gonna participate with this. You're gonna come along. And I get it, you know, once we read to the end of the book, we could see that he was always really into it. He was just withholding because he didn't want to, like, you know, it was messy, and he knew he was gonna, spoilers, he was gonna betray her. So, like, you know, he wasn't saying no because he didn't want to be intimate with her, to have the relationship. But a no is still a no. Whatever reason your no is, if you know you're making what you believe to be the best choice for yourself by withholding from doing something, you're making the best choice for yourself by withholding from doing something. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little strange. So, yeah, that was my qualm with that chapter of the Fourth Wing book. Yeah, I didn't like that part. It rubbed me the wrong way. And you know what? While I'm at it, this bit that she says, where was it? I read it already. You don't really know me, not at my core. Isn't that how he replied when I told him I'd end up falling for him? He has consistently warned her about the fact that he is not who she thinks that he is. Consistently warned her of this. And at the end of the book, she's pissed. She's like, I feel so betrayed. He's not who I thought he would be. Oh my goodness. Like, holy smokes. And, you know, like, I remember reading from Blood and Ash. That's my theme from the last time. And, like, Hawk does the same thing to Poppy, where he lies about who he is, and she stabs him. She's so intense. Ugh. But she's very betrayed, and he also sort of warns her off. But I feel like he lets her in. And now I'm reading, you know, Soul of Ash and Blood, and he wants it. Like, he lets her in. But in this one, like, man, when you've been told consistently by somebody, I am not who you think I am, and I can't be what you want me to be, I don't think that we should have a relationship. No. Another time, no. And she's like, this is what we're gonna do. Oof. I just don't know about that. I think it's really, like, as a reader, and I think too, like, seeing the phenomenon that this book was in the book talk circle, it concerns me a little. I bet if I went back and read Divergent, I would have similar issues, perhaps, between, like, Triss and Four and that whole romance thing. However, that book wasn't smutty. That book wasn't really about sex. Like, they had sex maybe once in the entirety of the book that was talked about, and that was later in the series. This book is like, there's stuff. So I really value reading books with really well thought out romance and relationship. And if the point of this is to be problematic, if the characters are intended to be problematic, I feel like the author has a responsibility to be an eloquent enough writer and to be strong at their craft so that the reader is very able to discern that. And I don't feel that that was the case with this book. I feel as though I was intended to root for this, to want this, between Xaden and Violet, and to approve at Violet's methods, and to understand her temperament at the end of the book when she felt betrayed. So, you know, that to me, that's one of the reasons why I would read the second book, is to see, you know, what was your intention with this, author? Like, did you intend to demonstrate faulty narrator to us? Like, are we supposed to be understanding these are young people making some decisions that might not be the best decisions for them? Because that's totally fine. I just feel like the writing wasn't strong enough to make that, like, accessible for me to be like, oh, that's what she meant to do. That's on purpose. So yeah, it's one of those moments where I hope people are using their best critical thinking skills and are being discerning about, you know, what it's not real, right? It's fiction. And there are some books nowadays where even in the fiction there are moments of real clarity where it's like, hey, like, I can stop. We can stop. Do you want this? And I really appreciate reading stuff like that, because I know, like, reading books and the, like, cat and mouse thing, of, like, he's playing hard to get, she's playing hard to get, they're playing hard to get. That makes me want them more. Or that means it's okay for me to push. She even says that. She says that in this book. She says, I decided to push. And he even used the words at one point in the book, I have to set a boundary about that. Like, the word boundary is used. And then she says, I decide to push. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like unless you were putting what you're reading through this kind of a filter of being like, is this good for me? Is this just really, like, hot? Why do I think this is hot? Do I believe any of this? If you're just consuming this media, especially when you're a little younger, like, I think, like, for us young people who are still trying to identify ourselves in our relationships and ourselves, I don't know, it just seems like, it seems risky. It seems risky. And I remember we were talking about this in the last video. Let me see. Let's look at the very beginning. Let's see if there's a content warning. Okay, I'm at the first page. Fourth wing, table of contents. Okay. Includes elements regarding war, battle, hand-to-hand combat, perilous situations, blood, violence, injuries, death, poisoning, sexual activities that are shown on the page. Yeah, like, I feel like if she had meant to talk about consent and abuse of consent, which was present in the novel, she should have put it there. Like, if you're going to talk about everything else that people might find triggering, that to me is just like, she didn't realize what she was writing was triggering. And that's a problem. That's a problem. That's why I think this bothered me so much, was because things like this, when it's the girl doing it, not the guy, it slips under the radar for some strange reason. So, yikes, chapter 32. And a couple of the other chapters. But I really liked the dragons. I really liked the dragons. Oh man, that was so cool. Yeah. But that little bit there is a bit questionable. So proceed with caution, I suppose, into book 2. Keep an eye out for the dodgy consent. And yeah, like, don't force yourself on somebody who's grieving. Don't dictate how they're gonna grieve. That's just, it doesn't work that way. Anyways.